What's up, everybody? Hello, hello. We are jumping in here live, and this is our second recording for the Rhombus developer community. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeremy, and I work on the ecosystem team here at Rhombus, and I have Trevor joining me today. Trevor, why don't you jump in and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Trevor Bernhard. I've been with Rhombus for a little about 3.5 years now, and I'm a sales engineer manager here. So basically, I go ahead and provide people from a pre-sales motion, some technical knowledge about our products, and then also some unique use casing when available.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it. Today, we want to take some time. And like I said in the last one, we just want to push out these content bits. Every time we have endpoints or new features and capabilities within the Rhombus console or the API, we want to spend some time to kind of show everybody how it works, how you can utilize this, maybe some real use cases, and where you can implement this stuff. And today, we are talking about line crossing and occupancy. So for those of you who have not seen, we published a new article in the Rhombus developer community that talks about our new line crossing features and functionality in the Rhombus console. This is something that we've worked on for quite some time in order to kind of enable operational analytics within Rhombus. And as you know, as developers, not only does this enable things within Rhombus, but this enables more capabilities and feature sets in the API. So we want to spend some time today. Trevor and I are going to kind of walk through what that means and what you're able to do with all this new functionality. And in true Rhombus fashion, we want to start within the Rhombus console, talk through the capabilities, and then we will go from there. And I'll give a demo on how that looks using the API. I think what's cool about this stuff is that as we build these feature sets, we obviously had something in mind within an implementation. So when you look at things like reports, when you look at things like how it looks on the Rhombus side, these are choices that we've obviously made. But to enable our developers and make sure that it's, matching maybe your branding, your colors, your abilities, we give you full access to every endpoint, to every capability through the API as well. And I think that's what makes kind of the solution unique. So with that being said, I will kind of kick it over to Trevor here, and we want to kind of go through, kind of talk us through, Trevor, what is this operational analytics? Talk through line crossing. What are we able to do with this?
Yeah, so as I'm going to pull up our screen really quickly, just to go ahead and pull up the console, and you can see I have my inspect tool open later to just show you how we can pull in the endpoints and quickly identify those. But line crossing itself is a unique use case of being able to understand when people cross a line from entry to exit and to be able to identify those unique events. So for the use case of there's an individual wanting to know from a retail space how many people enter my store and exit my store, so I can maybe efficiently staff during my periods of time during the week. Maybe one day I have 500 people, maybe one day I have only 200 people going in and out. And maybe I can understand what's going on with an environment. So first things first is I'm just going to show kind of like what it looks like within the console. You go to a camera itself, and you go to the settings, you go to the activity event one, and then you hit crossings. What this will do here is this will show up basically the ability to create these inside-outside boxes for either humans or vehicles. This makes you clearly identify what your outside, what your inside is for people who are entering and exiting your environment, so you can track those.
And this is cool,
So
Trevor. I think this is unique, right? So first of all, it does humans and vehicles, and I think
mhm.
it's egress and ingress, right? So it's from one direction to another direction, and this is where we're defining, right, what we're going to consider in and what we're going to consider out. Is that right?
Correct. Correct. So with this one right here, someone went ahead and preset it up to where you can go ahead and get that outside inside. I'll show you how we set it up on another camera, but what I like to talk about real quick before we do this is move on is what it looks like when someone goes through an environment and kind of how we track it from that, how we understand line crossing.
Hmm.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some layering, and I'm going to layer on some line crossing. Not only do we do bounding boxes, but we can layer on this line crossing. And you'll notice that if you've used the Rhombus console before, you'll see something different that pops up. So we can notice this individual walks into our environment,
Nice.
and yeah, from there, let me go ahead and see. Let's see, person entered events. Let's go to a different day real quick. Cool. So here's a good analysis right here. So what we have is, I just want to make sure, Jeremy, you can still see my full screen when I pull this up like this.
Yep, you're good to go.
Cool. So what you notice right here is you see some human movement, and what you can notice is there's this little orange box basically in the middle of the individual. What this accounts for is that's what we're tracking. So if this person moves from inside to outside, that would consider a person exiting the environment. And it's once this box crosses that line that they are considered an outside individual. But as you can see, we're tracking all these individuals coming in and moving through our environment. We're also catching the individual at the desk. So that's a good indicator of why this box was not stretched over her desk area, because we don't want to pick up, false or unuseful information.
That makes sense.
So I'm
So
going to
So to kind
yeah,
of
go
so to
ahead.
kind of kick off and just kind of take a step back, that was actually a really good visual. So I think this is important. We're calling it line crossing, right? But it looks like we're defining somewhat of a region to region. So we're saying, if individual A, and actually even in this display here, you can see it's giving each individual an identifier. So we've got identifier 22, identifier 23, 4, so on and so forth. But as we do these AI analytics and as we detect a person using a frame around the individual, I think that's also another pretty important point, right? As a developer, understanding, what is considered, crossing said line. Well, technically, it's from one region to another region, and it's the center pixel of the detection frame. So this is good. This is really good visual.
Mhm. Cool. So as we have that up, hopefully that's pretty understandable for people. Again, like Jeremy was saying, focal point, we go ahead and number human individuals so you can understand the human going through the environment. And maybe there is some misplaced information, and you might notice the number change on that individual, and that's the reason why.
Hmm.
So let's go ahead and I'm just going to go to a different camera, and I'm just going to set up line crossing from a standpoint of, from scratch. So let's go ahead and let's go to a different location. We'll go to this one, and we'll consider this camera right here. So pretty straightforward. This individual camera right here just catches that kind of secondary hallway that people come down that we were looking at earlier. I can go ahead and go to this region setup, and what I can do is I can go to crossings, and I want to identify humans, and I want to do an enter and an exit crossing region. What then I can do is I can go ahead and create a region. So individuals are going to turn the corner, and they're going to go ahead and come into the building or the area, and they're going to go ahead and cross this. So what I want to also do is I want to have a distance in between. What this does is it makes it so that there's no bleed over, or there's no intermediate jumping from one area to another. Because what if someone stops in the outside region, but maybe a partial of them is in the inside region? If I keep them farther away, that will make it so the focal point doesn't get caught, and you don't get errant data for that
That
point.
makes that makes sense. I think that's a good point too. Like putting a gap in between the actual one region and the other, it helps. Think about a scenario where you're in line and you're queuing up to go to like a point of sale, maybe, right? And you wanna pay for your transaction. Well, if you're standing either on the line or maybe you're kind of swaying back and forth, and that middle indicator is kind of going back and forth, it's going to drastically change your numbers, right? And so this gap. allows that to be more clean. I think it's also worth noting too, like you've got a gap here, which this is great, but imagine a world where an individual gets in from outside, they leave and exit the outside, portion there. They could technically run and not go into the inside box, and that wouldn't be a cross, right? It's just something to know.
Correct.
That's
Yeah, that
cool.
is correct. Another thing to note is to understand what's inside and what's outside. So if the person is entering, that means they're going from outside to inside. If
Mhm.
they're going from inside to outside, that means they're exiting. So in this use case, most people come around the corner from our door and walk into our building. That means I will go ahead and I need to flip these regions to basically understand my entry and exit options. I'm also going to go ahead and clear this real quick. And I'm going to hit save. Now, what I'm going to show right here is the endpoint that we hit. And later on, Jeremy's going to talk about this a little bit more. But as you can see, here's the endpoint right here, that update camera line crossing threshold. And then we also have the payload. So this is good to note because we get the egress, we get the ingress, we also get the inbox and the coordinates on that camera. So you can get some kind of example identifiers and how to easily set that up. And then you also get the out box itself and what that looks like for the XY coordinates that we want to put in the system.
That's cool. Yeah.
Anything else?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, I think that's really unique as well. Just indicating the X, Y. So you've got your X coordinate, your Y coordinate, and while we're doing this visually, obviously, you can kind of you can do this all kind of automatically through the API as opposed to the visual indicators. And you can see where you can do object type is human, right? And then you don't have to do ingress and egress. You could just do one direction maybe and kind of set it there. But yeah, just setting it up and being able to indicate. Obviously, if you try and get, and I'll show this later, but if you try and get information from line crossing, but there is no line, you'll never receive any information back. I think the other thing that's important to note, in Rhombus is we're doing this on edge, right? So when we're indicating that, hey, we've set up a line, this is actually going all the way down to the firmware level of the camera, and it's indicating on edge. And so you're saving your bandwidth. You don't have to send this up to server. This is indicating all the way at the chipset level, hey, this will be the line that you're going to use to count human or vehicle. And so looking at this, there's not a way to do human and vehicle, and you'd start to think about compute and things like that. These are features that we may progress later, but as of today, you've got your object type, and you have to indicate you're one or the other, right?
Yeah. I mean, an example, I haven't seen a lot of organizations where they want to track vehicles, but also humans at the same time crossing. I've seen where they want, maybe I have a parking exterior area where I want to track cars entries for the day to see if that matches maybe the amount of parking tickets or the amount of people who actually paid for parking within my area.
Totally.
So. Mhm.
Totally.
Speaking of which, let's go ahead and look at one camera with vehicle on. So we're going to head and go to a different camera at a different location. Going to go ahead and scroll down real quickly. I'm going to pull up an R500 camera really quick. And then again, I'm going to go to these regions and I'm going to go ahead and go to crossings. And what you can do again is you can see the outside and the inside. So example, let's go ahead and close this real quick. Let's go ahead and put those bounding boxes up for the line crossing. And then let's go ahead and see some cars come through our environment. And then let me turn on actually vehicle exit, vehicle entered. Let's go back to a different day real quickly. Refresh here. Cool. There we go. So what we can do, I can go ahead and go right here, go to line crossing. Oh, looks like I don't have bounding boxes enabled, but essentially you get the same option where you get that car pop up within the environment and you'll understand when it's entering and exiting your environment. Oh, here we go. So we get a car right here. We're also picking up license plates as we do this. So again, going to the point that we're doing multiple features at the same time for this camera, and I'm picking up, whenever a car enters and exits within there. So as we can see, we're picking up the license plate, and then we're also seeing this dot, and we're seeing the individual go from outside to inside and being able to track that. So I can do multiple data points with one single camera.
That's awesome. I think, again, I just kind of think of the use cases here. So we're identifying the vehicle. So we've got an individual identifier. It looks like number 125 on this one. So it maintains that identification or that identifier all the way throughout the frame. I've got a license plate, right? So I now know that, I can identify it in that way as well. And I've got, a line crossing event that's occurring. So there's all these different things, vehicle motion, all these things that can kick off scenarios or save to databases, or that you can use with third-party tools, or kind of to develop your own environment and utilize these in different ways. As Rhombus, I think it's important to note that we build the 80%, right? This covers most security scenarios and operational analytics scenarios. But as you get into these custom use cases, maybe it's for retailer drive-throughs or QSRs or whatever the case is, there's about 1,000 things out there that are possible. But it allows you to customize that really uniquely to your environment. So I think this is cool. This is good, Trevor.
Mm-hmm. Cool. We're going to go actually to reporting real quick within the Rhombus console to kind of show you what it looks like. So within logs and reports, you have analytic intelligence. This will go ahead and give you the ability to see the entries and exits for individuals, cars, things like that over a period of time. So what we were looking at actually these two cameras right here. We were looking at the 1919 rear parking lot, and we were looking at this one, the third floor lobby waiting area. And what you can see is over an hour of time, what happens. I'm actually just going to make this one bigger right here, and I can see at a glance, some data that we can pull through. But what I want to do real quickly is I want to bring that back up, and I want to hit refresh. And what I'm going to show right here is the endpoint that we're hitting. Again, showing you the payload, showing you everything that you can pull, and Jeremy's going to show that endpoint actually later. So here's, you can see the header. It's in the report one, get threshold, crossing, count report. Go to the payload, and you can see all the information that we're pulling through. I want hourly, I want it for human, I want it for this device, and then here is my end time and my start time for how much I want for that data. And you can extrapolate that and do with what you like.
Yeah, that's a good point as well, Trevor. I think that's awesome. So you can see there where, you can get extremely sculpted, right? So your bucket size is by hour, and then you're choosing human. And then we use epoch milliseconds for all of our time returns and timestamps. So you can see a start and an end time. But it's just a constant, sculpting and grabbing a ton of information. If you could click the preview there too, I think it's important just to show that raw data and kind of what that returns, which I'll kind of hit on this more later. But you can see, I've got a UUID, and then what actual events is it returning? Well, it's just returning a number of egress and a number of ingress, and then an epoch millisecond timestamp of when that occurred. And so all this data, all this raw data, right, gets to make up this beautiful report and all these valuable metrics that we put in our UI. But just because we, chose this implementation doesn't mean there's not 100 other ways to do it. You can do it your brand, your color, your report, and your style that really fits your environment. So this is really good.
Yeah. And then, like Jeremy was talking about before, is like what we can see here is, at a glance, average per hour, average exits per hour, most entries in an hour, most exits in an hour. Again, trying to extrapolate this data from a business perspective so I can do a high level overview. Hey, maybe I want to go the past 3 days, and I want to extrapolate that data, and I can see a little bit more different. I can see my busiest hour is usually 9 a.m. So maybe if I'm a retail shop, I know how to staff my environment, because at 9 a.m., that's when we're the busiest. So that's when I need to have multiple people on.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, let me take it over. I'm going to show you kind of the raw data from our side. I'm going to share my screen here, and then Trevor, I'll make sure that just want to make sure you're able to see it. Are you able to see my screen here?
Yes, I am.
Awesome, thank you. So, from a raw data perspective, obviously we've showed you in the Rhombus UI, and again, one of the unique things about Rhombus, or one of the things that I love, is that when we develop something, a feature set, generally, obviously, our backend feature set is way more robust. The front end takes some time to get polished and that type of thing. So, you generally have access to things way before we release them in Rhombus, and this is just the same case. These endpoints have been in the API. They've been showing in the developer community for some time, right? But let's show some raw data. So I'm going to go in first. We are in a transition period. So for those of you who have not seen, we now have rhombus.community. This is the Rhombus developer community specifically for developers. And this is free to join. And it's not just about building with and incorporating with Rhombus. This is an area where everyone can go in, get their questions answered, get access to free developer sandbox, hardware, equipment, everything you really need. And all that can be found in the developer community. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't already, but you use the Rhombus API, join here, put a post in. We'll jump in and kind of give our ideas and implementation. But the other thing you'll find here is under these guides and resources, you're going to find all these new feature sets. So for example, we've got Benny, one of our awesome SEs, has wrote an article about this line crossing, kind of how to utilize it, what it should return in an example response, all that type of thing. But even if you don't know what you're looking for, you're able to pop up here in the search, and then you can quickly type in, anything you want, and it's going to deep embed and look for everything related to line crossing. It's going to pull up an article. It's going to pull up the announcement. So that's a good way to go about it. But the last thing I want to highlight is the Postman collection. So like I say, we're in a transition period right now where we're transitioning all of our endpoints to Postman. Where that'll land is going to be on docs.rhombus.com. And then you're able to run that collection in Postman. So all these developer endpoints, all these endpoints that you want to grab data from, whether it be setting the region to region or utilizing it, you're going to see you have access to everything. One quick button to run in Postman, and then you're able to start working with that data yourself. So let me show you what that does look like. I'm going to pull up Postman real quick and show you some examples here. So as Trevor said, for the reporting section, we did the get threshold crossing count report. And what that looks like is bucket size, hour, crossing object, human or vehicle, dedupe, it's a true, false. And then we choose the device UUID that we're actually pulling from, and epoch milliseconds start and end. All that in here, and I can go and quickly get an example response. So here it is, egress, ingress, timestamps, all just raw data, right? In Postman, I love it because you've got a preview button and you're able to quickly go through and just kind of see it in a little nicer table. There is even now a post bot that can actually generate reports using AI within Postman, so you don't have to leave. Also over here, you're able to pop in, grab the curl, so you can just curl right from that section there, and you can see related requests. So again, anything that relates to line crossing, whether it's setting the region, all that's going to be in here. And easily accessible, right? All the documentation, everything is just all within Postman, and you can throw this in your IDE. You can grab it in any language, and so that's kind of why we're making this transition. We want to make it easier for you to utilize these endpoints and get the data that's valuable to you. But one thing that I thought was unique here is as we get this raw data, that's all good and well, but how many different ways can we implement this, right? With PostBot, I can give it a suggestion, and it'll go through and it will generate reports right within Postman. But I thought it'd be fun to take this out into ChatGPT. We're really leaning into a lot of different AIs and trying different solutions here. So I went through and I took that raw data response, and you can imagine where this is done with the API, right? This doesn't have to be done via their UI. But just as an example, I put the raw data in here and I said, generate me a report. Well, in true fashion, it came up and it's got my key metrics. So I've got total, and I've got net occupancy, and then I've got average per period, peaks, highs, and lows, and I've got this nice little table. Well, that's great, but I'm more of a visual person. So then I could pop back in and I say, let's create more of all I did, make it visual. So look at what this came through with, right? It came through very quickly, and it's like, okay, awesome. So now we're going to take that raw data, and now we've got a visual interactive report I can download, I can click anywhere on, and I can just keep working with this, right? Via the API, I can use whatever my LLM of choice or whatever my model of choice is, Claude, ChatGPT, Grok, if you're feeling fancy. And it's an easy way to be able to kind of, mock up and see what this would look like within your scenario. So I thought this was just kind of a cool way to show this example. As we have more use cases, what I'd love to see is anyone developing on the API, any of our developer community, post your example. Show us what you're working with. I think the more that we jump in and kind of utilize this area where we've got ideas and things like that, you can either comment right on the article below using this down here, or feel free, throw it in Innovator Lounge. So anything in Innovator Lounge, you can show examples. We want to see what you guys are building and what you're utilizing, the API for. As we come out with new features and functionality, there's things that we just won't think of. And so the more that we can kind of, work together and build the Rhombus ecosystem together, the better we're all going to do. So, don't hesitate to kind of utilize your AI of choice, or utilize, tell us what IDE you're using. I think all that stuff is just going to help us all, enhance our development and make sure that we're getting the valuable data that we need out of the API. So, Trevor, I think that's all I have. Anything that I missed here you think I should go over?
No, I think it's always actually really interesting so people, I mean, for me, I struggled with epoch milliseconds just from the standard of like finding a conversion. So I
Mhm.
think if you can just show someone really quickly, they go on a Rhombus camera and they click to a time where epoch milliseconds lives in the URL, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Absolutely. So in the UI, we try to, make the URLs contain as much information as possible to make it as simple as possible. So that's a good example. So when I go to a Rhombus camera and I'm looking at the camera itself, you'll see a couple things. Right in the URL, I have the UUID of that camera. So of course I've got a friendly name here, but if I need the UUID, that lives right in the URL. As I go back in time, and I change my timestamp, look at that. It just added the param t equals. There's my epoch milliseconds, right? So I can very quickly go to a moment in time, and then it just updates in the URL. Where this becomes important, and I think this is extremely valuable, is you can share these out in the same way with multiple params. For those of you who don't know, and I'll put it in after this session here, but you can add a different params that maybe show the settings, hide the settings. A lot of times when you look at a Rhombus camera, there's the location information at the bottom, but all that is adjustable through the params in the URL, and you can get most of the valuable context right here. And I just will hit on it one more time because I think it's so valuable. Use the inspect tool, because everything that Rhombus is developed on with these endpoints, if we can do it in the Rhombus console, we open up all these endpoints to our developers. So getting the media URIs to understand, the actual, whether it's a WAN, LAN, local URI, getting footage seek points, all these seek points are being generated down here. But all this is a good way just to understand, okay, what is happening in the Rhombus console? Now, how can I implement this in my environment and make it valuable for whatever my implementation might look like? So, yeah, that's a good point. All that URL stuff kind of sits up there. Same with location. I'll just show and hit on that one real quick. If I go to a specific location, I'm going to go back here. This location, 1919 19th Street, there's my UUID for the location itself. And as I go deeper, I've got the UUID for the camera. So again, the URL carries a lot of that valuable information in there.
Mhm.
Cool. Well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. This has been just another session. We're going to do more of these. We want to make sure that we just keep adding valuable bits of content. Of course, this will have a text generator at the end. So this will all be in the community. It's all searchable. It's all valuable. And any questions that come up over time, or anything you guys are implementing, we want to support that. We look at Rhombus as an ecosystem organization. So we are going to build for the 80%, and we want to make that hardware and all that stuff easy to utilize and easy to develop with. And we'll manage the firmware. We can manage all the hard stuff, but we want to know how you can implement it in your environment and make it valuable for you. So with that said, Trevor, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. And everybody, thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. Everyone have a good day. Later.